You're watching Japan Explained. Why Japan is quietly running out of people. Japan is not just getting older, it is getting smaller. And not in some distant abstract future. As of October 2024, Japan's population was 123.8 million, down 550,000 in a single year. That was the 14th straight annual decline. In 2024, the country recorded 720,988 births and about 1.62 million deaths. Even before you get to economics, housing, or politics, the basic demographic math is brutal. And if that sounds dramatic, it is still milder than Elon Musk's version. In 2022, he said that unless the birth rate rose above the death rate, Japan would eventually cease to exist. That line went viral, but the real story is more interesting than that. Japan is not vanishing. Japan is being redesigned by demographics. To understand what happens next, start with one number. In 2025, the number of children in Japan stood at 13.66 million, the lowest on record, and down for the 44th straight year. At the same time, people aged 65 and over reached 36.24 million, or 29.3% of the country. That means nearly 3 in 10 people in Japan are already elderly. So this is not just a birth rate story, it is a structure story. Japan already has too few children coming in at the bottom, too many people moving into old age at the top, and a shrinking middle that has to fund everything in between. Official projections say the support burden will get much heavier. In 2020, there were about 2.1 working age people per elderly person. By 2038, that falls to 1.7. By 2070, it drops to 1.3. That is the real plot, what the timeline looks like. So what does the future actually look like? Japan's official population institute projects that the country will fall below 100 million people in 2056. By 2070, the population is projected to be about 87 million. Down to 69% of its 2020 level. In plain English, that is roughly a 31% drop from 2020. And by then, 38.7% of the population is projected to be 65 or older. But the more important shifts happen earlier. By 2032, Japan's working age population is projected to fall below 70 million. By 2038, people aged 65 and over are projected to make up 33.9% of the country. By 2043, the elderly population itself is projected to peak at 39.53 million. And that same year, the working age population falls below 60 million. Then by 2062, it slips below 50 million. That means the country is not waiting until 2070 for the shock. The real transition is the 2030s and 2040s. That is when Japan moves from being an aging society to a society whose institutions, streets, labor market, and tax base are all forced to adapt at once. That is an inference from the official age structure projections and the falling working age population, but it is the obvious one. What Japan will physically look like. So what will Japan actually look like? First, it will look older. By 2060, the OECD says 39% of Japan's population could be 65 or older, and 25% could be over 75. That matters because a country of pensioners is not just older on paper. It consumes differently, votes differently, travels differently, and needs more health care, more nursing care, and more local transport support. Second, it will look more empty outside the major cities. A 2024 report by the Population Strategy Council said 744 municipalities were at risk because their population of women aged 20 to 39 is projected to fall by half between 2020 and 2050. That does not mean 744 towns literally disappear, but it does mean hundreds of places face a future of fewer schools, fewer shops, fewer clinics, weaker tax bases, and a harder time maintaining basic services. Third, it will look more concentrated. That is one of the central contradictions of Japan. The country as a whole is shrinking, but the biggest cities remain magnets. So the likely future is not Japan empties out evenly. It is that more of the country gets thinner while the core urban corridors become even more important. That is an inference, but it is strongly supported by the municipal risk data and by where foreign workers are already concentrated. Nearly 45% of foreign workers were employed in Tokyo, Aichi, and Osaka in 2022, according to the OECD. So what will shape this new Japan? There are four big forces. One, older workers. Japan has already delayed some of the damage by pulling more women and older people into work. The OECD notes that employment rose 5.6% from 2013 to 2021, despite a falling working age population, largely because participation increased among women and older persons. That is one of the most important undertold stories in Japan. The country has not solved demographic decline. It has been buying time. 2. Foreign workers and immigration. Japan still resists calling itself an immigration country, but the numbers are moving anyway. The number of foreign residents reached 3,768,977 at the end of 2024, up 10.5% year on year. Foreign workers rose to a record 2.3 million in 2024, up 12.4%. Reuters also reported that a JICA-backed estimate sees Japan facing a shortfall of nearly 1 million foreign workers by 2040 if it wants to maintain its growth target. That means the Japan of the 2030s and 2040s is likely to be more multilingual, more visibly international, and more dependent on foreign labor than the Japan many people still imagine today. That is partly inference, but it follows directly from the labor gap and foreign resident trends. 3. Automation. Japan has always loved the story that robots will save it. This time, that story is becoming less optional. Reuters reported in 2025 that Japan's care sector had only one applicant for every 4.25 open jobs, and that practical humanoid care robots are not likely to be deployed widely until around 2030. So automation will matter, but not as magic, more as backup, especially in nursing, logistics, and labor-short sectors. 4. A more compact model of the country. As population falls, not every town, rail line, school, or hospital network can stay the same size. The likely outcome is a more compact Japan, fewer children, fewer local institutions, more consolidation, and more political fights over which places get maintained and which quietly decline. That is an inference, but it is grounded in the projections for shrinking youth populations, municipal risk, and the falling total population. Official projections show the share of children dropping from 11.9% in 2020 to 9.2% in 2070. This is also why simply saying "have more babies" misses the point. Japan's 2024 total fertility rate fell to 1.15, down from 1.20 in 2023. Births among Japanese nationals fell below 700,000 for the first time at roughly 686,000. That is not a small miss. It means the decline is running ahead of what many policymakers once expected. But fertility is not just about incentives. It sits on top of wages, housing costs, job security, marriage patterns, working hours, childcare, and gender norms. Reuters noted that experts continue to point to job opportunities and gender disparities as major obstacles to marriage and childbearing. So when Elon Musk says Japan needs a higher birth rate, that is directionally true, but it is also shallow. The harder question is this: what kind of economy, workplace and family system would make people actually want and feel able to build families in the first place? And that is why Japan matters, because Japan is not just an isolated case. It is one of the clearest previews of what a rich, safe, orderly country looks like when low fertility, long life expectancy, and weak migration collide for decades. The official forecast says Japan falls below 100 million in the 2050s. The labour squeeze intensifies in the 2030s. The elderly share pushes toward 4 in 10 by 2070. And under unchanged fertility, employment and immigration rates, the OECD says the population could fall by 45% by 2100, while employment falls by 52%. So no, Japan is not about to disappear, but the Japan of the future will not look like the Japan of the past. It will be older, smaller, more automated, more dependent on foreign labor, more concentrated in successful urban corridors, and more ruthless about which communities can still sustain themselves. That future is not starting in 2070. It is already here.
Thank you for watching Japan Explained. If you like the content, please like and subscribe so we can bring more interesting stories to life.